Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Explored. Today we are going to go on a bit of a deep dive into the world of literacy. And as a Dyslexia Explored podcast, you might be thinking we must be talking about literacy all the time. But if you're a frequent listener, you'll realize there's a lot more to dyslexia than just learning to read. But learning to read is super important. So what we've got for you today is the owner of Dyslexia Reading Center and Learning Center, an educator. And what's interesting is she teaches dyslexic and ADHD children. And she also uses a program called the Barton Reading Program, which is very highly respected. And we've not actually had someone to really talk about the Barton program. Maybe we'll get Susan on the show sometime in the future. But today we've got Aly Young. Aly, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Darius. So nice to be here. I'm excited to share my story and experiences.
So, on the podcast, we like to hear a good story, and it's all about hearing people's dyslexia stories. And first question is, do you have dyslexia?
I don't think I am dyslexic, no, but it would be really interesting. I mean, as you obviously know, it's a interesting club to be a part of. But unfortunately, no, I do not think I'm part of that really cool club.
Okay, so that's interesting. Someone without dyslexia running a dyslexia reading center, and that's quite common actually. So it'd be interesting to kind of hear your story from the outside, watching dyslexia. So what was your wake up call to dyslexia?
Sure.
What woke you up to dyslexia and what was life like before and what woke you up to dyslexia?
Sure. So I was a public school teacher. I taught kindergarten, first grade, and second grade for about 10 years. Primarily first grade. That was really my favorite grade, favorite age to teach. I loved teaching reading. I was really good at it. And the reading specialist at the school quickly took me under her wing and said, "Oh my gosh, you're really good at this. You're getting great results." Trained me in a program called Foundations, which is a Wilson program that is also an Orton Gillingham curriculum. And basically over time, they gave me all of the lowest reading groups. And so then my middle and higher reading groups would be pulled out to another first grade class. So I was really sort of that tier 2 reading intervention teacher before the kids got officially pulled out for any sort of IEP or ESC support. And I just loved it. I'm a very linear person. So for me, the structure and the system, like the way that it was very systematic and sequential, was really great for me. I really liked that. I saw that the kids loved the multisensory component of it. And starting with the basics and really building a strong foundation just made sense to me. Nowhere along the lines did anybody talk to me about dyslexia, what SLD meant, because I don't know if everyone's familiar with the term specific learning disability, but on IEPs at least in Florida, I think around the country, it's referred to as a SLD on the child's IEP. Nobody calls it dyslexia. But again, nobody explained this to me. I don't even know at this point in hindsight if anybody that I was really working with knew that this is what was going on and that this was what it was. Because now I go to these IEP meetings and many of the ESE directors don't really understand what SLD is and that a specific learning disability is dyslexia. So I saw so much frustration with the students, kids hiding under the table during spelling tests, kids crying and melting down when it was time to read. And I didn't understand. I didn't understand how these behaviors were related to the kids struggling with reading, and there was never any information on it. I continued to learn and grow as a reading specialist, getting reading endorsements and learning more. Still, I mean, maybe dyslexia or, something about it was in a paragraph, in a chapter, in a book somewhere, but it was never talked about. Never was it in my opinion, it should have been a whole class, but it's not. So fast forward, I ended up leaving the county and joining a mentor of mine
Fast
to
forward, could you give us a timeline here? So how long
Sure.
ago was that? And give us a timeline.
Sure. So in 2014, I left the public school system and joined my mentor on this venture that at the time was called the Learning Loft. At that time, we were two passionate educators that just did not align with what was going on in the public school system. We saw that there was just so much red tape getting in the way of children getting their needs met. So, for example, children with dyslexia, perfect example, they're so incredibly bright that they're not necessarily always failing badly enough to be eligible for an individualized education plan. So what
Yes.
happens with them, and as I started to be on the other side of the table, I saw, okay, so the teachers are aware that this child has a learning difference. The teacher is aware that this child is experiencing behaviors, whether it's explosive behaviors or implosive behaviors because of their struggle. But this kid is smart enough to create coping strategies and kind of likable enough to get by, so they're not failing badly enough. So therefore, even though they really would benefit from this different instruction and accommodations and modifications, they're fine. They don't need it. They don't qualify for it. So they don't get it. So the gap continues to widen. Their confidence starts to go down the drain. So it's just this spiral because of the red tape and because of the process that is so flawed. So I was very disillusioned by that. And I just decided to join my mentor at the time in this venture, where at that time we weren't necessarily dyslexia. It wasn't our niche yet. It kind of like came along, but we just knew there were these kids that didn't fit into the round peg, or they didn't fit into the box. So we said, let's see how we can help these other kids. So we started
So
off. Yeah.
so when you're using an Orton Gillingham based system
Yes.
inside of the school,
Yes.
and you're, using it with the children, it's very much designed for children with dyslexia because they need that explicit instruction and multisensory instruction, etc. But you weren't looking for dyslexia. Dyslexia wasn't within your frame of reference. It wasn't in the school's frame of reference,
Right.
etc. That's mind blowing. And
Not on
and
my
this was
radar
how
at
many
all.
years ago?
That was, I would say, probably around 2008, 2010-ish, around that,
So
like throughout that window.
only 15 years ago. So 10 to 15 years ago, this was your school. Okay, we got the
A good
picture.
school too, a good school
Yes.
with wonderful leadership and a great principal, and I loved being there, but never was dyslexia on my radar. It was just, "These kids are struggling, use this program, here you go."
So you've
And
still not woken up to dyslexia yet at that
no,
point.
no,
Okay. So
not at all.
you've left the school, you've gone with your mentor, you started to create a program. Are you started? So what happens there?
Yes. So we just started a little tutoring business in a little office that was about probably less than 900 square feet. And we would work with students after school. My mentor and myself, we would each take a student, and we started with helping them with their homework, which is what every tutor really kind of starts with. Oh, I'm going to help them with their homework. And then we started noticing, no, you know what? Now we're getting a little bit more, we're getting more students, we're getting a little more understanding of what these students need. We got brave, and we invested in the Barton Reading and Spelling System. And we started working with students, starting with, level 1 and going through that process with them. And we started to see results. Started to learn more about dyslexia. My mentor, side note, is dyslexic, very dyslexic, and it helped me to understand more of the adult side of it and hear her struggles as far as when she was a student. So everything slowly started to come together, and we started to realize that helping these students with their homework wasn't solving the problem. It was putting a Band-Aid on the problem. So we thought, we're not going to we're going to have a separate program for kids that truly just need help with homework, but we're going to focus on remediation that's going to give explicit strategies for these children to be able to decode, because if you can't decode, you can't even do the homework. So it was just like, let's focus on the root cause, the root struggle here. And it just spiraled from there. We started realizing that this was a really powerful niche, that this could be something that we just focus on and try to be just the go-to people for this. And then
So
eventually, yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out before we go into the detail of how it developed from there, which I really want to get to, is what was the wake up call for you to start going, this is dyslexia? What really woke you up to dyslexia? Your mentor, or was it, is there a particular moment or incident or something? Because often it comes down to a sort of an epiphany, or often comes down to a person and an encounter that triggers that.
Yeah, well, I have to say I learned a lot from my mentor about, because like I said, from the beginning, my educational experience, I was one of these typical people who have believe all the myths and misconceptions that you see things backwards, or there's all these different things that's, somebody's not working hard enough or smart enough. So I started by just understanding it a little bit deeper. And then, yeah, there's one particular student. She's actually still a student at the Learning Lab now, and she's in 8th grade. And we saw her doing her homework one day, and she was writing the word park. She was supposed to write the word park. And I mean, there were L's in the word, there were reversals, there was not a cohesive beginning and end to this word. And this is a super bright little girl. She could talk her way through a business meeting, probably, schmooze her way through any networking group, but she was in 2nd grade and could not even start to find the first sound in the word park. And so my mentor was like, "Oh my gosh, like she's so dyslexic, and we should assess her and continue, and she really is a better candidate for Barton." And so just little by little lights started to come on, and I really did my own research and learned by myself, reading Sally Shaywitz Overcoming Dyslexia and over again, and understanding the ways to help these kids and what was going on for them, because it wasn't something that I experienced. So it was really important for me to understand what it is, what it isn't. And that was the only way I saw that I was really going to be able to help them. So that particular
Fantastic.
student, we ran to the mom right away. We were like, "Listen, we think we know what's going on. We need to get a meeting with the school right away." Luckily, that mom goes all in. She's like, "I'm all in. Let's do this." So luckily, we were able to get her an IEP with the school. She got supports at school, services and accommodations. Then she was coming to us in the afternoon for her remediation, her one-on-one remediation with Barton.
Fantastic. That's great. So you had the wake up call. And as so I suppose let's go through the dyslexia questions. It's like, what's your wake up call with dyslexia, and what was your biggest challenge? So when you started doing this with children with dyslexia, what did you find was your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge still is the same. I've learned how to handle it better and how to address it better. But my biggest challenge, I think, is people who don't understand what dyslexia is. So, you have these students who are so incredibly bright. They just need to be taught in a different way. And you have schools saying, "Let's wait and see."
Yeah.
When I hear
Oh,
wait
the
and see,
wait and see. The wait and
I'm
see.
like, "Run the other way." I
Yeah.
spoke to a mom yesterday who has a first grader. She's 6.5 years old. The mom was like, "We have dyslexia in our family, and she's doing this." I'm in my mind going, check, 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 check. And she says to me, the dreaded, "The school says we should wait and see." And I was like, I said, "Stop right there." I said, when anybody tells you to wait and see, you run the other way. So you did, you're here, and I'm here to help you. I said, and I explained to her why that's so damaging. A 6-year-old, that's like prime time. We can really help her get where she needs to be and close those gaps quickly. I explained that, this is the optimal time to start remediation. I explained to her that the gap's going to continue to widen. We wait and see. And the most important part, I think the most impactful part of the wait and see, is the confidence factor. Because while she's waiting and seeing, all her other friends are getting it and growing and learning and reading chapter books and getting excited about reading. And she's just sitting there twiddling her thumbs, waiting and seeing. So there's no positive side to the wait and see approach. And again, it goes, what's my biggest, hurdle right now is that it's like the misunderstanding of that. Schools not understanding the detriment of that. Sometimes I'll even have a parent who's maybe, I don't want to even say in denial. It's more about they just don't understand. So they'll even say, well, we're going to see how the school year goes, or,
Yes.
stuff like that. Oh, it'll click, it'll come together, things like that. Or, or
What
some
about this as a phrase? It's eventually they'll get it,
eventually they'll get it. Exactly.
you know,
Yep.
because that
My older
underlies a
one did. My
whole
older one
key.
did. They'll get it. Yeah.
Yeah, eventually they'll get it. And I remember when I was taught as a primary school teacher how to be a primary school teacher, and I asked about how do I teach them to read. And I remember my lecturer saying, well, to be honest, they pretty much teach themselves once you give them the basics. Okay.
Okay.
And I said to themselves, because from my own experience with dyslexia, I knew it took me a while to learn how to read. I said, but what about the children who find it maybe a little bit difficult to read? And she said those words to me, eventually they'll get it. And I
Right. After what
realized
struggle? Right.
that is the mindset
Yep.
of the school system. Eventually they'll get it. And
Yep.
then there's a correlating mindset. If they don't get it, they're not meant to get it. So, oh, well, eventually they'll get geography, eventually they'll get maths, eventually they'll get physics, eventually they'll get reading or whatever. And if they don't get it, it's probably not for them, you know?
Mhm.
But you just can't have that attitude when it comes to reading and learning how to do maths and learning how to do the basics of life. You can't just, oh, eventually they'll get it. And oh, if they don't get it, it's not the end of the world. It's obviously not for them. And I
Right.
think
No, I
those are some
totally.
underlying mindsets.
Totally, and it gets me very heated when I hear these a 6-year-old who, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect timing for her to start this." And another thing that the mom said to me on the phone was, "And I told the school that the school mentioned that we should read with her every night, and we're reading with her every night." And I was like, "Okay, I have to explain something else to you now. Reading with a child every night is wonderful for connection and it's wonderful for building a love of literacy. It doesn't teach somebody how to read. Reading with someone every night does not teach them how to decode. So it's just bananas to me that in this, 2023, there's still schools out there. And I say the schools because you can't expect parents to be the experts in this. They're
No.
probably really good at whatever their job is. They're good at marketing. They're good at sales. They're good at whatever their job is. They're putting their faith in these experts. They trust their
Yes.
babies with these experts and they're saying, "Oh, the experts are saying to wait and see. The experts are saying to read more." And I'm here to be like, "No, that's not what you need to do." So, and like you said, it's this type of approach, this type of instruction, following the science of reading and explicit instruction, it really is the best practice for teaching all readers how to read this way. It doesn't hurt anybody to learn how to read this way. So I think more and more places are denouncing the old whole language approach and understanding that the science of reading is beneficial for all readers.
All right. So, how about we give listeners sort of an overview of Barton? Like, let's imagine you're in the UK. Now, very few people in the UK know about Barton at all. Okay. They'll maybe be told, oh, use toe by toe. Have you heard of toe by toe?
I've not.
Like there's a book in the UK called Toe by Toe, and pretty much every school, if the child has got dyslexia, it's recommended, oh, use the Toe by Toe book to teach them how to read.
Write that
It's
down. Okay.
it's kind of like if you put Barton and OG and learning to read on a scale, it would be, I don't know if this would be accurate enough, but it's a small part of what like a Barton system would do, a very small part,
Okay.
phonically based, etc., but it's nowhere near the rigor of the Barton system. So let's go into the Barton system. Give us a 360 on what the Barton system is for a newbie.
Sure. So the first step is the Barton screening. So when a student starts with us, we do the Barton screening, which is a 3-part assessment. It starts with we want to know if they can hear each word within a sentence and they understand that words are a part of a sentence. So we will read a sentence. The wild animal is eating spaghetti. The student repeats the sentence, and then they pull down a corresponding tile for each word, and then they're tapping each word in that sentence. We want to make sure that they, first and foremost, just the basics, that they hear all the different words in the sentence. So that's the first part. Then the next part is syllables. We want to make sure that the students understand how to segment syllables. And unbelievably, I usually have to give a quick little lesson on what syllables are before I even give this part of the assessment, because so many kids are not being instructed appropriately on syllables. I can tell when I meet a student, the ones that have a really strong, and it doesn't matter of the school, it's about the teacher. I can always tell, okay, this kid had a really strong teacher, this kid didn't. So it's not always the most accurate, because so many kids just are lacking that instruction on syllables. But anyway, so the next part is syllables. We go, I say the word, they say the word, and they tap out the syllables, tell me how many syllables. And
So
then
they've got, you talk about these tiles. Please don't take the tiles for granted. So I'm imagining, I think I've seen pictures of them, but they're basically like Scrabble.
yeah, they're square little tiles that have different colors,
Oh, they
which
have
is going
different,
to come in, is going to come into play in this third part of the
do they have
screening.
letters on them?
No, they are blank.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Give me a visual understanding of what's happening with the
Yes.
tiles. I don't get that.
As we get into so the next part, I'll explain the tiles in the next part. So the first part is not hugely important with the tiles. For the first part, you could use M&Ms to do that. But for the second part, this final piece is really, really important. This third piece is part C of the screening, and this will determine if the student is ready to move on to level 1 of the Barton reading and spelling system, or if they still need more support on phonemic awareness, and we use a program, which I'll get to in a minute. So part C is about phonemic awareness and auditory memory. So I will say a word. I will say 3 sounds. Let's say n, ooh. Okay.
L. Okay.
Okay. So then the student is going to repeat those 3 sounds. That's the first part. They have to repeat them appropriately. If they don't, I can repeat them 1 time.
Okay.
Okay. And there's little tracking sheets. Did I repeat this? Yeah. You can only do a certain amount of repeats, all these different things. So then they pull down the tiles, a different color tile. And these are just like, say, green, yellow, orange, red, blue, blank tiles that are like this big, like a square, this big. And they pull one down. So they pull down one for all 3 sounds. Then I'll say, all right, now tap and say the sounds. Ooh. So think about all the cognitive processes that are going on there. They have to repeat the sound. They have to hear the sounds appropriately, repeat the sounds, and then they have to pull down the tile for each sound. And then they have to remember the sounds and keep them in their auditory loop that whole entire time. So, and then I say, okay, wash them away. And they put them back where they go. So now if there's a same sound, they use the same color. So if I do k, k, p, they're going to say k, k, p, and they're going to pull down. K. Maybe it's green. K also has to be green, and then p has to be a different color. So then they tap and say those again, and there's only a certain amount that they can get repeated and a certain amount that they can get incorrect. If they pass the screening with the amount correct, I think they can get 6 errors in there, and they cannot move on to Barton level 1. But that's the screening. So let's say they don't pass the screening. There's a program called Foundation in Sounds that was created. I cannot remember the name of the lady who built it. I believe it's a husband and wife, if I'm not mistaken. They created a program that's a prerequisite or a precursor to Barton Level 1,
Mm.
specifically to target those skills so that the child can now eventually pass Part C. So it's called Foundation in Sounds. It's very similar to Linda Mood Bell's LIPS. I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but it works on the auditory memory. It works very explicitly on phonemic awareness. The sound cards for this, there's again no letters. It's all phonemic awareness. So for the sound there's a picture of a map. For the sound there's a picture of a nut. And we want them to be able to go to pull down the map, pull down the nut, and say and understanding, there's an apple for things like that. So, and it's even getting deeper into what the tongue is doing when it's making a sound, what your lips are doing when it's making a sound. Is it a vibrating sound? Is it a whisper sound? There's a mirror that comes in this case to show the kids what their mouth is doing, what their tongue is doing, what their teeth are doing. It's so explicit. So let's say now they did foundation in sound. We give them that Part C again. They pass it. They move on to Barton Level 1. Barton Level 1 is all phonemic awareness. There's no letters on these tiles. And it's about auditory memory. It's about segmenting sounds, blending sounds, and manipulating sounds. And it'll usually be 2 or 3 sounds max. So or VC or CVC words. Then every level in Barton has to be passed at a level of a 96% mastery to move on to the next level. If they don't master the level, they have to redo some of the parts that they struggled with before they can move on. It's very big on, we cannot move on until we've mastered. And the procedures are very important as well, because it's so systematic. The reason it works so well is because of those procedures. So tapping out vowels, apple, apple, tapping out different things, really getting the whole body engaged. So then let's say they pass level 1 post-test at 96%, they move on to level 2. Level 2 now has letters on the tiles. So now we're bringing in phonics. So let's say we've mastered the phonemic awareness part where we did not have letters on tiles. We're just manipulating sounds. Now we give letters, we're matching letters to those sounds. And we're saying, okay, so the this is the letter that makes the sound. And we're learning, okay, now we're going to segment this, blend it, manipulate it. And then level 3 goes into those closed syllables, CVC words that have blends in the beginning, CVC words that have blends at the
What's
end.
What's a CVC word?
Consonant, vowel, consonant.
Okay.
So like cat. So, but then we're teaching, let's say, so something that would have a blend in the beginning and a blend at the end might be, let's say brush. Well, actually, SH is a digraph, so that's different. But really teaching them explicitly those digraphs, right? Because then we understand that now we have letters like SH and CH and TCH and all these other things out there that also make sounds. So it's going through step by step by step, introducing all the sounds, the 44 sounds in the English language, and how to manipulate them. So we start with the very basic of just a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. Then we add in blends in the beginning, blends in the end, blends in the beginning and the end. So the syllables start to get bigger.
This podcast is sponsored by dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com, which helps you organize yourself creatively with a productivity system for Apple devices. So the big picture, we've just got to level 1 and level 2 in your description. Well, level 0
That was
to
3.
level
That
1
was 3.
to 3. How many levels are there?
So there's 10 levels, but
10 levels.
I've never gone past level 6 personally with my center. We've pretty much had after level 6, the gap is closed. They're reading on level. And then we have to focus on other priorities, unfortunately. We can't just keep putting all of our eggs in that basket. Barton has to be done 2 hours per week to be done to fidelity. And we follow that. We take that very seriously. So, not every student has once, 2 afternoons per week is a lot for many students that are going
Yeah,
to school all day. They have soccer, they have, all kinds of other things going on.
yeah,
Sorry, football. But so basically, that's the most we can really do with them for a long time. So once they get to that place where, all right, they're reading on grade level now, we have to focus on, can this child write an essay? Can they write a paragraph? We didn't get time to focus on any of that. Really, and then we have students that have gone through Barton and they're able to decode, but now we're realizing that their comprehension when it comes to math word problems is struggling. So we need to go through that type. So it's like once we
yeah.
get to a
It's
certain level with
interesting.
our there's these other priorities, these other balls come flying in, and we're like, oh, we got to target that. We got to target that. We got to target that.
Yeah, because just because you can read and decode the words doesn't mean you're necessarily comprehending the text. And a lot of these reading programs are explicit in their terms and conditions that are like, look, the reality is your child's going to learn how to read, but
Mhm.
learning to comprehend text is another skill on top of that. And a lot of people assume that you will end up just getting comprehension. And I actually tutor children and adults with dyslexia, but not, but after the reading phase
Mm,
on
mhm.
how to mind map and how to visually organize their thoughts. And what I ended up having to do was to develop a new word for it called bullet mapping, which was the focus was to try and focus your ideas and simplify and delete information until you got a really strong visual outline that you could then turn into an essay. And that's another big skill that is assumed that you will be able to pick out the key words, remember, comprehend, etc. And it's interesting that you focus in on that after the reading because quite a lot of reading programs and centers, it's kind of like we do the reading and then after that you kind of go on to somewhere else. So you kind of carry on with them, do you?
Yes, very few of our students leave for any real rational reasons. Obviously, if there's a financial reason, or sometimes there's parents that don't align on the significance of this type of intervention. They go their separate ways or whatever. But I'd say for the most part, when people start with at the learning lab with us, they don't usually leave. They start, usually the parents the kids sometimes too, but really the parents value this so much and they start to think, I can't live without this type of
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
for my child with dyslexia.
So we've covered the Barton. So where are we now? We're 2023 just now. And you started the lab. When did it start being called the Learning Lab?
So in 2014, we were still the Learning Loft. In 2000, I want to say like 18 or 19, we rebranded to the Learning Lab.
And was
And
that
everything,
because you went more dyslexia, or when did you
yes.
really focus in on dyslexia?
Yeah. I would say 2018 was when we really made this huge rebranding. We wanted people to understand that we're not a homework babysitter after school place. We are specialists and we are using specialized curriculums. And so we really went above and beyond. I mean, we changed our logos, we changed our whole message.
Okay.
And
So
and,
that
and
was
then
5 years ago. How many
yep.
students do you tend to look after in the Learning Lab then?
So now we have each location, we now have a full-time program in each location. So which is a Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 1:30 program, where those and we have about 8 kids in each center. So just in that full-time program, we have 8 and 8,
What do you mean
16.
by a full-time program? What, the kids
So,
go there all day?
yep, they're enrolled in the state as homeschooled students. And with that homeschool student status, they're given a lot of flexibility. So they come to us full time during the day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 1:30, and we focus on the reading. Every day they're getting reading one-on-one intervention. They get writing, they get math, science, social studies. They're working on cognitive training softwares. And there's only right now we have three teachers to the 8 students.
Wow. Okay. And how long do they do that for?
That is, I would say on average 2 years. The kids are usually there for about 2 years
All
with the
right.
intention to reintegrate into a traditional school setting.
Okay. So it becomes a school. It's basically a
Yep,
specialized school.
yep.
Okay. And then you've got other students that come in the afternoons
Then the
after
afternoon
school.
changes up, and those kids, we have students that come at 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, and 5:30. We have multiple teachers working in different rooms, and the students come for 1 hour of one-on-one, either 2 days a week or 4 days a week.
Got you. Okay.
The afternoons are kinda like a revolving door of students. We have the 2:30 kids, 3:30 kids.
Yeah.
I would say at this point, we probably have about 60 to 70 overall students.
Okay. Do you use mind mapping at all in your training systems in any do you use mind mapping?
I've
Or
never heard of the term mind mapping. Is that similar to like orthographic mapping, or is it more
well,
of
I
like
suppose that in
concepts?
America there's lots of alternative terms for it. Webbing,
Okay,
um, uh,
brainstorming.
brainstorming, spider diagrams, concept diagrams,
Yeah,
you
we do
know,
a lot
these
of
kind
that
of
for writing.
spidery diagrams.
Yeah, we do a lot of that for writing and for comprehension. Yes.
Right. Okay. Do you use any software for that?
We use a few different softwares. The primary software that we use is called Fast Forward, and it's a cognitive training software that basically uses neuroplasticity to rewire the neural targets into the neuroplasticity to rewire the neural pathways that are causing the language processing difference that causes dyslexia. So it works on memory, attention, processing, sequencing, and then it also simultaneously works on the phonemic awareness and phonics skills. And it's really heavily based in language processing, auditory processing, visual processing. So that we use that software. We use CogMed for some of our ADHD students that struggle with working memory and attention. We don't really have a software for the mapping.
Okay, great. So one of the things that I'm just trying to think what our listeners would be asking at this point,
Mm.
you know, what are the kind of age ranges that you find that children start to use the Barton? What's the kind of age
Sure.
range?
Best case scenario, 6. As soon as they're learning how to read, that's the time for them to start the Barton program. Like that, like I said, the family I spoke to yesterday, who I'm hoping that they start soon. And
Can I pause you on that? Because, you know, sometimes we just skip past the best case scenario, but it's worthwhile just pausing on the worst case scenario. You know you've got dyslexia in the family. Your child's showing signs of dyslexia, you know, like early signs might be the way they speak, the way they tie their shoelaces, the way
Mhm,
they do other processes, the way they are learning to tell the time. All of these are processes that are affected by dyslexia, aren't they?
mhm,
And maybe they get a formal diagnosis sooner, but they start doing the Barton program. You know how there's 6 levels? Does it does it fit how long does it take in the best case scenario, as it were, to do those 6 levels?
that's such a good question. Okay, so best case scenario, let's say we start with a 6-year-old. They're gonna move pretty rapidly through levels 1 and 2, and then they'll probably take some time on level 3. and 4. 3 and 4 is like the meat and potatoes of the program. But they'll start to see results quickly as far as how they can apply these skills, because it's just building appropriate foundation from the get-go. When we have so to answer that question, the goal is to get them reading on grade level. The goal is to give them strategies to be able to apply these skills in real life, reading on
Okay,
level.
so
Yeah.
my question then is, for a 6-year-old, what is grade level? And what would be grade level, like level 2 in the Barton program? Would that be grade level for a
So
6-year-old?
we measure it through what they should be expected to read in the classroom. So
Okay.
basically it's like, here's the tools and the strategies we're giving you, level 1, level 2, level 3. But now now we're going to give you a first grade reading passage. Can you apply these skills and read it? Right? So like you've learned these strategies, you've learned how to decode these types of syllables.
Yeah.
Now there's a story about a cat. Can you these are all things you should be able to apply now. Can you read this fluently, accurately, and comprehend it? So that's
For-
how we know what we're doing is working.
So forgive me for asking very obvious questions,
Yeah,
but
of
let's
course.
say you've got level 1 to 6 in Barton, right?
Mhm.
Does that match to grade 1 to
No,
grade 6?
no, no, no,
So
not at
how
all.
would it, if I was to do a chart and to try to match level 1 to a grade, what would it be? Would level 2 be grade 1? Would level 3 be grade 2? How would they match?
Maybe more along the lines of that. Level 3 would probably be first grade expectations.
Okay. So when you were saying the 6-year-old in grade 1 would
Mm,
go through level 1 and 2 quite quickly and then get kind of really
mm,
working on level 3, then
mm.
that level 3 would get them up to read grade level
Pretty
for grade
much.
1. Okay.
Pretty much.
So
If they yeah, exactly.
let me zoom in on that then.
Yeah.
As a theoretical parent here, my kids are now
Mhm.
25 and 23, um, both with dyslexia.
Oh, wow.
So how quickly could a kid with dyslexia, moderate dyslexia, say, go through level 1 and level 2 at 6 years old? What's the rate of going through these programs?
So that depends on so many factors. That depends on their academic stamina, their attention, their focus, because not all 6-year-olds are the same. It depends on
Yes.
their cognitive ability, depends on what they've been taught before. So there's a few different factors, but I would say,
Okay.
like, talking about that best case scenario student, they can pretty much go through level 1 and level 2 in like, maybe a month or something like that. A little over
Oh, they can go through it that quickly.
maybe like
Two,
6
two
weeks.
hours a week that they could go through level 1 and level 2 within a month or two. Is that what you're saying?
I would say maybe 2
Okay,
months.
I've got you.
Yeah,
All right.
safely, yeah.
And
Yeah,
worst
and
case
then
scenario for a
worst case
6-year-old,
scenario for a 6-year-old,
very worse, but a really
yeah,
finding it really hard. How long would it take them?
I would say that's so hard to answer. Level 1, again, is pretty quick. I think there's only about 6 lessons in level 1. So I would say maybe like 3 months, for like a little 3.5 months.
Okay, right, got you. And
At
then
that rate.
level,
If they're coming every day, it's totally different, but the kids are
yeah,
coming
yeah,
twice.
twice a week. So then let's do the level day experiment. Okay. Let's say you were doing it every day, okay,
Mhm.
as a kid. Does it,
Oh,
is it literally just a case of, it's like my physiotherapist said to me. Okay, so my physiotherapist said to me, "You've hurt your shoulder. Okay, I've got these exercises for you. You can fix it in 3 months, or you can fix it in 1 month. It all
mhm.
depends on how frequently you repeat this exercise each day. If you do it once a day, it'll be sorted in 3 months. If you do it 6 times a day, it'll be sorted in a month. Which do you want? Is that the same
Exactly.
scenario?
If you go to the gym every day, you're going to have very different results than if you go to the gym twice a week.
Yes.
It's
It's as simple as that. Yeah.
yep.
And okay, so it's about how many encounters you have with that sort of learning experience.
Mhm. And consistency and frequency is always going to make things more efficient. Let's say they have a couple days in between their next session. Like, oh, do you remember what we did last time? Let's say a kid comes Tuesday, Thursday. They come to their Thursday session. We don't see them Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Now we see them again that Tuesday. Do we need to reteach what we did? Do you remember it? So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, the level three then, when they're really getting into, those cat words and all that kind of
Mhm.
blending the sounds
Mhm.
before and after and so on, how long does that tend to take for kids to work through if they're doing it a couple of hours a week?
That varies tremendously, tremendously.
Give me the
Because
range.
oh gosh, level 3 has, I want to say something like 13 lessons in it. You have kids that come to us that have speech issues that have not been addressed with like maybe their R sounds or their sh and ch. Their things like like blends that are like BL, or a lot of kids get frustrated because of speech with like DR blends and TR blends. Like, for example, they might think, or here's another, like somebody might think truck is spelled with a CH because of how they process it and how they're hearing it. So there's so many. I mean, there sometimes we have to spend a lot of time on just one lesson or one sound, and we have to
Yes.
branch off and just say, all right, we're going to take a pause from this right now. We're just going to focus on the difference between the TR sound and the CH sound. That's all we're going to do today.
Wow.
So it just really, yeah, it depends on every individual student, that level 3 and level 4 progress and consistency for sure. But yeah, it's so hard to give an idea how long that could take.
Okay, give me the least amount of time it would take, the quickest time it would take to get through those 13 sessions. We talking, well, if you're doing two
Okay, so
hours
let's
a
think. So
session,
it
is it an
usually,
hour a
in,
session,
in a
roughly?
best case scenario, it's an hour session. Yeah. In a best case scenario, I think the way I used to do it myself, really taking a deep dive, each lesson should be should be 2 hours, I
Okay.
think. So let's say like Monday, if you're coming Monday, Wednesday, you finish lesson 1. The next Monday, Wednesday, you finish lesson 2. The next Monday, Wednesday, you finish lesson 3.
All
So
right. So if we do that maths and there's, say, 13 lessons in level three, then we're
mhm,
talking about 3 months minimum to do it if you're going to
minimum,
do, yeah.
best case
Okay.
scenario.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Got you. And it might take a child a year.
it could. It could take them the whole school year. And then you have things like the kid is sick for a day, or we're
Yeah,
closed for a
yeah,
holiday, or,
yeah,
just
yeah. Okay. So I'm just getting my head around the program itself. Forgive
mhm,
me for being so, detailed about it, but I think parents will be fascinated because Barton is a very structured program and has that
very
benefit
structured.
that
Yeah.
it's quite nice to see how that structure. So I'm seeing this picture, right? So best case scenario, we get level one and two done in a month or two. Okay, let's just say a month for level one, a month for level two. Best case scenario is 3 months for level three and maybe a year for level three. And
Right.
then I'm going on to level four. And is level four very similar? If I'm going to take 3 months to do it, will I take 3 months to do level four? If I'm going to take 1 year to do level three, am I going to take 1 year to do level four? Are they very similar in
Yeah,
terms of
they're
effort?
similar. They're similar. Level 4 is big. Level 4 is a lot. It gets into vowel teams and why does a vowel change its sound when there's an E at the end? And now the two vowels make this different sound and there's silent letters. It gets crazy. And then it goes into multisyllabic words and how to decode different types of syllables when you're in a multisyllabic word. Very, very in depth.
So grade four, once you've done, no, not grade four, once you've done the level four, it would really match to getting you up to grade level two reading ability. Would that be
Yeah,
about right?
yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Level 3 I yes, it's hard to make it equivalent to a grade, but yeah.
Okay, right. And then you said grade six was where a lot of children feel right.
Level
I've got
6.
level six, sorry. I've got
Yeah.
my what would level six relate to in terms of grade reading level? So if you're thinking grade a level six has
Mhm.
got you enough tools to move on to other
Yeah.
challenges. So what
Yeah.
would you say is the reading grade level that is that's enough to move on to other challenges?
Yeah. So, they say if you're reading at about a 5th or 6th grade level, you can get on in life. You can read the newspaper, you can read menus, things like that. But I would say that going through, so 5 is morphology, really getting into understanding prefixes and suffixes and why this changes, if you have an S here, SH here, how it changes the sound, things like that. Level 6 goes much more in depth into morphology. And I think if you're getting that, you got the phonemic awareness, you got the phonics, you got the morphology, you're getting vocabulary, you're going to be able to have the strategies and the tools in your tool belt to decode middle school text. And that's usually where usually reading instruction ends much earlier than that. So you have a stronger foundation than probably most at that
Yes.
page.
Yeah, there I know a number of children who know more about grammar and reading with dyslexia than
Right.
their teachers or the children in their class because they've really had to become very intentional in that area. It's
Intentional.
one of the interesting dynamics of dyslexia is that you have to be very intentional
Yep.
about certain things in the processes of learning. And it's not just exclusive to reading, you have to be intentional about a whole because it's a processing difference. We process information differently. It affects lots of other processes.
Correct.
And so where was I going with that? I got a little bit
Well, I
sidetracked.
think you were basically saying that because of that explicit and intentional instruction, they're probably further along with
That's
things that
it.
other people, right, like just take for granted. Right.
That's what I was saying. Yes. And they actually get much better at it. That some people who find writing stories really hard with their dyslexia actually end up conquering that by being so intentional. They become
Right.
extremely good
Right.
and concise writers when actually they were very wandering generalities and all over the shop, which is the default setting for most
Yep.
people with dyslexia when it comes to writing. But once you learn a scaffold, a structure, a pathway, a route, a formula, a recipe, you can really hone in on that and
Correct.
refine that recipe.
Correct. And then that student might go to college and meet a friend who's not dyslexic who never learned those things. And what? How do you know that? I didn't
Yeah,
never learned
that's right.
that.
Yeah,
Oh, my
yeah,
parents got a lot of money for me to go to tutoring.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the money, actually. Let's talk about the money now that you've mentioned it or reminded me of it. That
Sure.
costs quite a lot of money to go through a program like this. Let's say you're going from 0 to 60. I'll tell you what, I like my analogies, as you can tell. I 0 to 60, like Barton level
Mhm.
one
Mhm.
is like 10 miles an hour, level two 20, level three
Yep.
30, level four 45, and 60 miles an hour. That gets you
Yep.
along the freeway
No.
just fine. You can go places. You're maybe not going 70 or 100, but you
Yeah.
definitely can get places and you're
Yes.
not over revving your engine down at the level
Right.
at a level one or level two. Would that be a useful analogy, do you think, or
Yeah.
a realistic analogy?
Definitely.
Accurate?
Definitely.
Okay, so you've gone from 0 to 60 and you've taught your child to go from 0 to 60. What does it cost people to put them kids through the Barton Reading Program?
Okay. So it's tricky to answer that because it also depends on the amount of time they're coming.
Yeah, yeah, of
And
course.
and,
Yes.
so it's like we have intensive summer programs that are more of a package deal where the kids get their one-on-one time. They also get cognitive training software, and they're also getting writing and language arts and things like that. On average, right now, we charge about $98 for an hour of one-on-one.
Okay.
That's probably like the easiest number to give you.
Okay.
But as a business owner, of course, I have to take into consideration my rent, insurance, what I
Yeah,
pay
yeah,
the
yeah,
teachers, the
yeah.
curriculum itself, and all of that. So there's a lot to consider in the pricing. There's a lot to
But from the
factor.
parents' point of view, because I know people in America often, these programs exist in America where they just don't exist in the same way in the UK.
Interesting.
You can't go to a Barton Reading Center in the UK in the same way that you can in
Hmm.
America. Like, if you're going to find a reading center like Barton in the UK, you're going to have to drive, a couple of hours
Yeah.
at least, maybe 3 hours to get somewhere. A center like London or Birmingham or Edinburgh or whatever, it's going to take a lot of effort and time and to get there. But you've got those programs, and let's say it takes you 3 years. You're in the program maybe for 3 years or so, and you're
Mhm.
doing a couple of times a week, couple $100 a week times 50 weeks in the year. So what is that? What's 50 times? I can't do the maths.
I told you when we first started talking today that I have an undiagnosed math disability, so I'm not doing any math today.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Siri. I'm gonna type it in. So 200 a week times 50 weeks, $10,000. And if they do that for 3 years, that's $30,000.
Right.
How many
Which, interestingly enough, our
years?
full-time program is about 37,000 for the full-time program for the full year, which is interesting because it's like an expedited version. You
Yes.
won't
So,
you won't need this level of intensity for all that time. So that's interesting math.
okay. How long do you think people stay in that sort of going from 0 to 60 with the Barton program phase? Do they tend to do it for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Where's the
Say on
range?
average 2 years, and then we usually have to switch it out to other priorities because
I
then we're
see.
faced with the facts of, all right, well, now so and so struggling with math, now so and so struggling with writing. We have to focus our priorities.
Okay, so I'm thinking 10 grand a year, but you're missing sessions and weeks and all that jazz. And
Right.
it's not every
Right.
single week. And it ends up being about 40 weeks in the year. So it's about 8 grand a year. So in total, realistically, it's going to cost about 16,000 to go through something like this and teach your child to
An
read
investment. It's an investment.
because the school's not managing it. Yeah.
Correct.
So how do you go about justifying that investment? You know, Not that I'm
Well,
criticizing you at all. Please don't hear it like that. It might have come across like that, but I
well,
think it's useful.
how
Yeah.
do parents justify it?
Yeah. How do you help parents justify
Justify
the
it. So,
16,000?
okay, so here's why, right? I mean, the school's not gonna do it for you. It just is what it is. I'm here to tell you that. They're going to help as much as they can if your child meets criteria for eligibility. And if they don't, they're not gonna help. They're not gonna provide anything, any supports. That's the
Okay.
first.
I'm going to be my best friend. One of my best friends doesn't believe in dyslexia,
Oh,
and
okay,
and
great.
he's and he's
Bring it
dyslexic.
on.
And he's
Okay.
dyslexic. Okay.
Uh,
And he's got a dyslexic kid too. But so one of my best friends would argue, okay, and let me be him. I'll channel him
Sure.
right now
Go ahead.
because
No, no, let's do it.
there'll
And
be
and
the internal objections of parents out there that are thinking like
yes,
this. So
that's
I'll sort of channel that.
yes. And then, but before I forget, I just want to talk about, we'll talk about that. And then also that I don't want to forget to talk about the difference between a tutor that goes to a coffee shop and works on homework versus what we do.
Yeah,
That's another
I think you've made that pretty
huge
clear. But
buy-in. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So let's say we're going to spend, I've heard all of this as a parent, okay? And I'm weighing up, should I just do the wait and see, eventually they'll get it approach? Or should I, you know, front up realistically $15,000 over the next couple of years to get ahead of the game on this? Okay. So I'm kind of thinking to myself, I might, I'm pretty convinced they could get my kid from 0 to 60 in the next couple of years with this level of intensity. That makes sense. Okay. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, devil's advocate,
Mhm.
okay, maybe eventually they'll get it up to that. They'll be a bit behind, a couple of years behind their, you know, peers. But, by the time they're 10 or 12 years old, they'll be at grade 5 or 6. And do you know what? I'll have saved myself 15 grand. And, we won't have gone through all of this hassle of going to the center every 2 times a week and so on. What's your kind of response to that logic?
Confidence. That's my number one answer. Yeah, sure. Your kid's gonna be treading through the water wearing a weight vest while the other kids are swimming by. Will they be able to swim treading water in a weight vest? Yeah, sure. But they're gonna struggle. The other kids are swimming by, they're struggling, they're being weighed down. How does that impact them emotionally, socially, and to what expense, obviously not quantitatively, but to what expense are you willing to put your child through that struggle?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Oh, and I'm gonna channel my friend here again.
For it.
They'll go, oh, whatever doesn't kill you
Doesn't
makes
kill
you
you, makes you
stronger.
stronger. Uh-huh.
They'll make them swim harder and get
Yep,
stronger and so on. I don't
yep.
agree with that, but I have
No,
to
of
be
course.
very clear. But
And I've had people say all these things to me all the time. And, at that point when someone says that to me, I don't want them as a client.
yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
you're obviously a difficult person. You think you know it all.
Yeah, yeah,
Luck,
absolutely.
and I hope your child, and I do, I say, I'm like, good luck, and I wish you guys well on your journey, and the door is always open here if you make a different decision.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting out of devil's advocate mode
Okay.
now. They've decided to pay the $15,000, okay? And how you make an emotional decision and to do something and then you rationalize it afterwards. You just go, I'm just got to do this for my kid. I'm doing it, I'm paying it, that's it. What's the rational justification afterwards? Because there's a lot to this. You've got the confidence element, that your child is going to be keeping up with everyone else, but also the value of being able to read, the
Yeah.
value of being able to learn. So let me answer my own question a little bit, and then you could sort of run with it a bit. School's very useful. School's actually quite important.
Mhm.
Like we often think, oh, well, what does school do? Life really starts after school, but, you learn a lot of really useful skills in school that we just take for granted. But what I've noticed is that if you can't read or you're struggling or you're always left behind,
Mhm.
there are all sorts of hidden knock-on domino effects. Now, I'm just going to give the most painful one for so many of our students and myself and other people I know with dyslexia, and that is being locked out of recess time.
Mm,
Now, this
mhm.
seems so trivial, but it's like
Oh,
the
it's
the
terrible.
teacher says, "Oh, look, Darius, you've not finished this work. Look, stay behind at recess and just finish that off. I will
Mm,
do you a favor and I'll give you extra time to finish it, and you'll do it during recess." Oh,
breaks
great
my heart.
favor. You've just
Yeah.
robbed me of being able to spend time with my friends. They're
Yep.
all becoming better friends. I'm being left out. Their relationships are growing and mine's not. And then another teacher does it and another and another. And then I
Yeah.
just interviewed previous podcast guest Liam Nicolosi, who is on Netflix. He's an actor in the TV show Diaries. And he was saying one of the biggest thing was he was being locked out of recess. And he was like,
What
I don't understand why this is.
Right.
But that's just one of the costs. The next
Mhm.
cost is you often need a reading skill to be able to then acquire another skill. And if
Right.
you're struggling with the reading skill, you don't acquire that other skill that school can give you. So, the US system, parents in private school or whatever, you're investing what? Somewhere between 100 and $120,000 for the whole entirety of the child's education.
Yep.
But because they can't read, it can't be delivered to them. They're not
Right.
acquiring
Right. So
them.
things like science and social studies or civics or history
Yeah.
or geography are lost on them because they can't read.
So run with that for me.
Yeah.
Justify the return on investment in terms of actually getting the investment that is going to be made into them in school, getting the
Yeah.
return on that
I
education.
mean, well, people with dyslexia are so brilliant and so capable of so many things. These are the game changers of the world. These are the visionaries of the world. These are the entrepreneurs. And I always joke and say that the dyslexic students are going to be hiring all of the straight A students to work for them. And I actually have a client who's a very successful entrepreneur. And he tells me all the time, he's like, I don't even write my own emails. He's like, I like get my ideas out and then I send it to somebody and she does the grammar and the spell checks and she sends it all out because I have the ideas and I can execute it. He's like, but I'm not going to write an email. I don't know how to spell. But I think overall, when people with dyslexia are given this magic key to learn how to read appropriately, they have the key to success. They're limitless. There's no end to what they can do. So if they can't read, then they may not ever have that spark with science or have that spark with civics or government or acting or art or anything that may be a positive contribution to the world that could be their piece of the world is not going to be accessible to them unless they're able to read. So whatever that is, even math that these days with the instructional curriculums that we're using for math are so language based. If they can't decipher between the what this question is even asking, they're not even able to show their worth in math. So, yeah, everything's very, very, very dependent on the ability to read. And people with dyslexia are capable of so much. They just need that missing piece there.
So, what I'm hearing from you is, if you spent a couple of years in the Barton Reading Program, it could do you a lot of good.
They're unstoppable. Yeah. I mean, I have a student, that one little girl I talked to you about in the beginning who couldn't spell the word park. She is now goes to her own IEP meetings at school. I don't know what it's called in the UK, but an individualized education plan meeting. She advocates for herself. She was actually the one of the advisors at school offered her mom to have her be promoted to the next grade halfway through because she was doing so well. Because she's been in this program since second grade. She knows how she learns. She knows what doesn't work for her. She's empowered. She's educated on the way that she learns and what's best for her, and she runs with it. So she's a perfect example of somebody who just needed that little missing piece, and she's unstoppable.
I've just realized that I interrupted you half an hour ago because you started with the ideal of starting in grade one as
Ah,
a 6-year old, but then not everything is ideal. And so we've
right.
been talking about this kind of ideal scenario, ideal timings, etc.,
Right.
time ranges. Let's go to the other. We could go all the way to the extreme of there are adults who use the Barton reading system. And Susan actually, I think, having read the history, started with adults and then moved down into children. Isn't that right?
I think I have heard that as well. We don't work
Yeah.
with adults, but I've heard
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So let's look at what if they don't start at that ideal time and they
Mm,
start at a less ideal time. Tell
mm.
me about where you often find that the parents are going, right, it's time to bite the bullet and actually go and do something about it. We've done the wait and see, and the waiting has become so painful. When is that sort of typical pain point, would you say?
The pain point usually comes when they're failing they're having these either anxiety for girls, sometimes the behavior is more implosive, like anxiety, depression, and for boys, it's physical most of the time, not always, but it's kind of like the child ends up screaming for help in many different ways.
Mm.
And the child really starts to struggle and they can't do it. And now the homework is piling on top of them and they never addressed it appropriately from the beginning. So now it's like this just huge weight just barreling on top of them. So it just becomes really heavy. And
What kind of age range do you think that tends to happen?
well, there's lots of studies about the third grade wall because typically that's when we stop with the explicit reading instruction and children are expected to read in order to learn instead of learn to read. So the third grade wall is a big one. That's usually when things just like things start to become real. It's like, okay, here's your science book, read it. And now you have a test on it. And the kids are like, whoa, all my cute little things that I was doing to kind of get by and fly under the radar aren't working anymore. But I would say, like, for a major scenario, probably fourth grade, fifth grade, by middle
So
school. Ugh,
to make this universal, grades are around the world, Australia, UK, and so on. So let's do it by age, shall we? So
sure.
it's universal. So third grade, is that
Third
equivalent to
grade is
9 years
like
old?
9. Mhm.
9. Okay. And so 9 years old, it really starts showing in terms of I am failing, I am
Mhm.
sinking, you know.
Mhm.
I often think of it as, I kind of imagine this picture of children swimming
Mhm.
in a river, and that sort of grade 1, 2, 3, you can kind of fake it by standing on
Yep.
the bottom and not swimming, and you're
Yep.
just walking along the bottom and you're pretending to swim. And then
Yep.
suddenly at grade 3, 9 years old, the bottom is you can't stand in it. But what you can do is sort of sink a little bit, bounce
Yep.
off the bottom, come back up, sink a little
Yep.
bit, bounce off the bottom,
That
hold your
is
breath,
genius.
and you
Yep.
can still fake it a little bit, but you are beginning to drown or you're going under. And
Mhm.
then grade 4, where we're talking 10, 11 years old.
Yep.
That's okay. So let's talk about the 10, 11 years old.
10. So, like, I think fourth grade is really like 9 turning 10, and then fifth grade is 10 turning 11. That I mean, that if you've waited that long and the child slid under the radar for that long and they finally start to struggle, I mean, you're gonna have confidence issues, behavior issues, and then you just have such bigger issues to deal with than what was simply from the beginning. If they were 6 and they were struggling with reading, okay, now we're just teaching them how to decode. You have just a much bigger situation on your hands when it comes to
Yeah,
that.
and at that age, you've got other things going on, like, so let's
Peers.
just say 11. Okay, and things have really gone pear-shaped. They're starting to drown. They're starting to act up in some way. They're either retreating or they're acting out.
Yep,
They're trying to mask their behaviors in all sorts of different coping strategies that they think helps them cope. They become the class fool, or the joker, or the con, I'll
yep,
just fake it and make it and duck and dive and all sorts of different techniques that
yep,
people with dyslexia use to get by.
mhm,
And what often happens, they're finding it hard to sleep at night, they're
mhm,
maybe crying at night,
sure,
they're having kind of anxiety attacks at night sometimes. Sometimes it can show up with, what I see often is that it displaces to other weak points that you've got. So if you've got a propensity towards eczema, your eczema flares up, like because of the stress, but like me, or propensity towards asthma, you might have more some asthma attacks or stomach aches, or
mhm,
wherever your little weakness is, that stress
yep,
starts to
impact,
exacerbate it.
right, for sure,
And what happens is that you've got a life as an 11-year-old that is full of so many other things. You've got
mhm,
friendship groups developing, you've got sports that you're trying to get good at, you've maybe got some health issues that are flaring up because of the stress. You're spending more time in recess, so it's affecting your friendships. you're maybe not got the friendships you're hoping for because you're not spending the time with your friends at school. There's so many things that become front of house issues, which
Right.
aren't like, oh, maybe we should teach you how to read. And it's like, no, maybe we need to stop him hanging out with the bad kids or
Mhm.
this kid or this
Right. We have
scenario,
much
whatever.
bigger problems now,
Yeah.
bigger fish to
Yeah.
fry, for sure, for sure. And then another thing that parents will say to me often is, "Oh, well, we can't do this because of football, or we can't do this because we're traveling, or we can't do this." And it's like, if you can't go back in time, obviously, but if you just prioritize things at the appropriate time, we can go on and on, and it's heartbreaking. But the goal is just to help parents understand that this is the priority, and it's not and this level of intensity is not forever, but it must be prioritized before your priorities are much more severe.
It needs to be pointed out that it's not fair.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
At some point as a parent, you just have to accept this situation is just not fair. And there's a part in you saying, this is wrong. My child should be given the education that they need, etc. You look back and you go, oh my goodness, how stupid was I to fall for that line, which was, let's just wait and see,
Wait,
see how it
see.
goes. Eventually they'll get it. They're maybe 14 years old, 15 years old, and you go, oh my goodness, they can't even write a
Yeah.
creative story? Haven't they been writing stories for 10 years and
Right.
so
But
on? And they're like,
it all goes back to educating the teachers and the admin and the administrators and all of that, because the parents are going to trust who they believe to be the experts.
yes,
Always will. And I have parents that will be in tears, moms, dads, in absolute tears when I'm the one that has to present that their child is dyslexic. I'm meeting with a family this afternoon, sixth grader on a second grade level, been told to wait and see all the different and the mom's like, feel so guilty. I failed my child, crying and crying and crying. And I'm the one that has to be like, you didn't do anything wrong. You listened and trusted who you thought were the experts. You're an attorney, your husband's in marketing. You're probably really good at what you do. So you said, I'm going to trust these people because they're probably really good at what they do. They're the ones that failed you. But of course, it's still heartbreaking to know that you wasted all this time. So it's really sad when you realize that and you face these parents that just feel like they failed their kids.
so we started with the best case and best time, 6 years old. We're
Right.
now looking at 11 years old. Okay. Let's say they've hit the grade 3 wall. Okay. 9, 10 years old. They've tried to keep going. They're sinking. And now they're saying, Mom, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm
Mm.
drowning. I don't know what to do. And they start the Barton Reading Program.
Yep.
What's the difference between starting the Barton Reading Program at that stage than at the 6-year-old stage? How much longer does it take? Is it easier? Is it faster because they're older?
Um,
Does it take longer?
well,
Or
so
what's the dynamics?
there's uh, it's a multifaceted answer. It can be faster because they probably will move through levels 1 and 2, maybe even 3 much quicker. But there's all these other things now. I don't want to be here. This is babyish. I hate coming here. So we're not going to just be like, well, it's hard. Life's tough. Open up the book. Let's get started. No, we have to address the emotions before we're going to learn anything. So now this teacher becomes sort of like a therapist, right? We have to, first and foremost, we have to connect with this student. We're not going to get anywhere with the educational aspect until we've established a relationship, trust, connection with this student. So that takes much more time because
Hmm.
we have much bigger fish to fry. So it's not just like, let's jump in. All right, let's do this. Oh, it's going to be so fun. Yay, gumdrops and rainbows. No, now it's like this heavy, I get it. You don't want to be here. I hear you. This feels hard. Let's talk about it. How are you feeling about this? Tell me about your day in school, what things are hard. Now we have to really go through the emotional parts, and you can't not.
Yes. Yes. So let's say Johnny, 11 years old, comes to the program, starts working through the program. You build that bond. He starts learning to read. Maybe a couple of years later, he's got back up to grade six, grade five, grade six level,
Mhm.
which would be what he's in. What grade would he be in at that time when he's 11? What, grade
Like fifth,
four?
fifth grade.
Fifth grade. So he's in fifth grade. He's maybe down at the second grade level, like that person you're saying.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
what you get past that sort of emotional reluctance and that shame and so
mhm.
on. And then they're like, okay, they start learning a little bit and they start seeing some progress quite quickly.
Yeah,
And they go,
they
actually,
do.
it's helping me a bit. I
Yeah.
think it's maybe worth it. And
They
reluctantly,
do. They start
you
to have
know,
their own buy-in for sure. And of course, they're
yeah.
always gonna have those days where they feel emotional. But yes, they start to have buy-in and then they're like, "Oh, this is great. These people really care about me. They're helping me. This is awesome. This is way better than school." So they start to see that.
And so they're going. uh, So in a couple of years or a year to 2 years, if he starts at grade five and he ends at grade seven, all his friends are probably about grade seven reading. He's at grade two, but in those 2 years, he's accelerating up to like a grade five, six level just in
Yes.
a year or two, which is
Oh, they'll make gains so quickly because
talk
I
about that
mean,
dynamic.
the dynamic of them starting to
Yeah,
feel
the
success.
gains and so on. They make quick
Yeah.
gains and
Yeah, I mean, if a student is on a second grade level, like this particular person that I'm meeting with this afternoon, we're doing a meet and greet with the parents and the new teacher because this is a very highly emotional situation. And I want to match her with the right teacher. Yeah, I mean, basically, this child's decoding on a kindergarten level, decoding on the phonemic awareness was like on a pre K level. I showed this student who's a fifth grader. She's supposed to be in sixth grade, but she was retained nonsense words. UB, couldn't do it. AK, couldn't do it. LAL, LAL, LOSK, LOSK, could not decode any of them. So I stopped right there. That's like, if they get four wrong, we have to stop on this one assessment. So once this person, this child is given the appropriate phonemic awareness ability to decode those things, she's going to be like, bing, the light's going to come on. Okay, now I have all these tools in my tool belt. I have all these strategies. It's going to make sense and start to make sense. I never like to say it's going to click. I hate that. Doesn't click. It starts to come together when you have the pieces. So I think that is powerful for them because for so long, this particular example is a perfect example. They don't even know that there's rules to this arbitrary language. No one's given them these rules of how to do it. She just has no clue up to this point until we start working with her that there's rules, that there's a reason, a rhyme, a reason to it. We're going to give her those rules and strategies, and it's such a sense of like sense of relief.
yeah. And it's not too late, is it? Like if you want to do it, it still works at any age, or is
Works.
that, what your thoughts on not too late? I've got a few opinions on that, but
We've had some people that have reached out to us with high schoolers, eighth graders. At that point, it's a tricky situation because it's like, do we tear down the house and rebuild a foundation? Or do we kind of rebuild the house on a faulty foundation and do like a fixer upper? It's tough
yeah.
because then again, like, is this so we have a ninth grader, 10th grader who's maybe 15, 16 years old. Are they going to come every day? Are they going to come over the summer? Are they just coming 2 days a week? What can we really do if they're really kind of able to read on like a fifth grade-ish level, or they're faking their way through the fifth grade level? Is it worth it to tear down the whole house and rebuild the foundation? So it becomes tricky, and it's on a case by case basis at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I found the same with mind mapping and study skills. Well, that's been fantastic. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for
my
sharing all of that.
pleasure. I'm sure we
Is
could
there
talk
any,
forever.
is there anything that you've been thinking, actually, it would be really useful to make sure I shared this before we go? Is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah, something that just came to me at this last second that I think is so important for everybody to know. A lot of times people are afraid to label their child with dyslexia. They're
Mm,
afraid to give that name to it. But I think it's important for people to know that when you name it, you tame it. And in my experience, when children or people, because adults too, when they have that awareness that that's what it is, that's been causing them all this struggle, it is a sense of relief. They start to understand I'm not stupid. I learn differently. My brain processes differently. And overall, it seems to be a positive experience when you can take ownership of that and have that awareness and say, okay, that's what it is. And then and I think it's really important for parents to empower and educate themselves and their children on what dyslexia is and isn't, because there's so many wonderful gifts associated with dyslexia. So I think the first step is to take ownership of it, acknowledge it, have awareness, and then empower and educate.
that's fantastic. I love it. If you, what you name it, you tame it. Like it. If you name it, you can tame it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. If you don't name it, you can't tame it.
Correct.
You just don't know what you're dealing with.
Right.
It's like once you switch on those glasses and you're looking and you can see it. If you
Right.
can see it, you
Exactly.
can tame it, and
Right.
that's what the naming is happening is it's
Right.
a big finding clarity in that cloud of confusion.
100%.
Why do you think schools in America find it so difficult to use the word dyslexia?
Oh my goodness gracious. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a lack of education, a lack of understanding, and a lack of, well, the lack of understanding comes from the lack of education. I think that it's just not something that's taught in universities. Like if a student is going to school at a university to become a teacher, to become a reading teacher, to become, a reading specialist or whatever, it's just not talked about.
Well, I do another podcast called the Personal Brain Trainer podcast about executive function skills with Dr. Erica Warren, who is in New York. And she pointed out that the sort of assessment criteria and so on are are more geared towards identifying it as you know SPLD, special learning differences, and
SLD.
SLDs, and teachers prefer to just call it an SLD, and that's it's a
Mhm,
special learning difference. It's an LD, a learning difference, and that's
mhm.
it, or learning disability, or
Right.
difference, or
Yeah,
difficulty.
but really, I mean, what I tell parents all the time is they'll get an evaluation. Then it'll say diagnosis, specific learning disability with a reading impairment, DSM-5 315.00.
Yes,
Google that. Put that into
yeah,
Google. What
yes,
comes up?
dyslexia. Yeah.
Dyslexia. So, and I'm always the only one to ever tell them this. So,
And that's I find this fascinating because there, you know, schools have always found using the word dyslexia very hard for the last
yeah,
120 years.
exactly, which
Um,
doesn't help our case.
and there's always some reason not to use it
Right,
as an educator because
right.
it's kind of like, oh well, we don't like to label children. Actually, we like to think of it more as a processing difficulty, so we
Mm,
treat it as a processing difficulty. Oh, it's a learning disability, or so, and there's all these, and you're like, it's dyslexia. Let's just use a common term to label a specific thing, just call it what it is. Oh, well, actually, it might be a bit of dysgraphia, it might be a bit of this, it might be, language processing disorder, it might be, and you're like, why are you confusing me so much? Why don't you just call it what it is? What's your thoughts?
So I went to a meeting the other day. I was at an IEP meeting, and this dad had been just, I mean, he looked like he was about to flip the table over. He was so angry because for the whole last year, the student was in 3rd grade last year. They had been told SLD, SLD, SLD. And they're sitting in these IEP meetings and no one's explaining what SLD means, what they should be doing at home, what they should know about it, what they should help the kid know about it. No one ever talked about any of that. This dad did his own research and found the learning lab, reached out to us. The student did a evaluation with us. I explained what SLD is and the dyslexia and all these different things, showed them the evaluation. He started with us over the summer. And then I went to the IEP meeting this year where we all sat down around the table to discuss everything. And the ESC director, the exceptional student department director, still was not explaining this appropriately. And I said, okay, so-and-so blank has dyslexia. We were addressing it this way. Are you addressing it this way? He doesn't have dyslexia, SLD, specific learning disability. And I said, that's dyslexia. And she was like, no, it's not. She actually didn't know that specific learning disability is an umbrella term for dyslexia. And this person's probably getting paid $80,000 a year to be the expert at the school. The dad was fuming. Their kid is having behavior problems now because it's gotten to this place. And I just said, listen, call it whatever you want to call it. I just want to make sure that he's getting the appropriate services and accommodations that he's entitled to. I don't care what you call it. And we're going to walk out of here today and we're not going to agree on what we're going to call it, but we have to agree on what he's getting at school. Can we agree to that?
Yeah.
You know, and that was it. I was hot. Like when I walked out of there, I was like heated. So yeah.
And you know, to be fair, okay, is SLD is an umbrella term for a number of specific learning difficulties, although you could call it, I like to think of them as specific learning difficulties rather than special learning. What is the actual term?
Specific learning disability.
Okay, right. It's ironic, isn't it? Specific learning difficulties, but it's not very specific.
But they're not specific, right?
We don't make it specific, but it is actually quite specific. So you've got the umbrella term of a specific learning difficulty. It's not just, oh, he has difficulty. There's a specific learning difficulty there. And within that umbrella of specific learning difficulty, there's a number of different learning difficulties you can have, a number of different processing difficulties you can have. You can have difficulty processing phonics. You can have difficulty processing maths, processing movement, processing handwriting, and that translates into dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. You know, then you've got, it overlaps with ADHD in terms of co-occurring.
And some kids have all of the above.
You've got ADD, you know, you've got autism in there. You've got all sorts of other smaller specific learning difficulties. But the important thing is, I'm not saying that SLD is dyslexia. It's important when you've got an SLD assessment that you are able to name the difficulty that you've got so you can target the intervention. And in many ways, it's like saying, oh, I've got difficulties with my eyes, you know? And you're like, all right, well, okay, but what specific difficulty? Oh, I'm short-sighted. All right, we'll put on, you know, when you're reading, you know, when you're reading, you don't need to put your glasses on if you're short-sighted. But if you're reading the blackboard, Darius, remember you're short-sighted, put on your glasses. Or Darius, remember you're dyslexic, you need to mind map this bit or do something visual or whatever. You find the appropriate thing, the tool. And I think using the analogy of eyesight is something that people can really understand, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is. It's a great metaphor. I use that all the time.
Really, what kind of metaphors with regard to eyesight do you use? I'd love to hear yours.
Well, just similar to what you're saying, and just understanding that, you know, for a lot of kids, you know, you don't know how you're seeing things until you put the glasses on and then you realize, oh my gosh, I can see so much better now. It's that realization that you know, you kind of don't realize how much better things can be and how much you're struggling.
And so if your child has an SLD, okay, a learning difficulty, you need to find out, is this a difficulty with phonological processing or mathematical processing, or
Yeah.
what difficulty is it
Yeah.
exactly?
And I
And
think also for parents, if your child has a visual issue, right, you're going to get them glasses. So if your
yes,
child has a learning issue, you need to get them
the
academic
right
support.
tool for that as well, the right
Okay.
set of classes.
And
Yeah.
you would never question the eye doctor and say, "Oh, well, I don't know if we want to get the glasses." You would get the glasses.
Yeah, that's right. And you get it to match your way of seeing the world. And
Correct.
that's what we're doing with dyslexia, is making sure people get the right tools to help them with their way of processing the world,
Yep.
which makes learning to read difficulty, but they're very good at reading the world round about them. All the
Absolutely.
patterns,
Yep.
all the stuff that's going on, they can read at a different level than
Right.
just the decoding of words. So basically, Ali, it's been great to have you on the podcast. We've gone on quite a bit.
I know. It's all like 2 hours.
Yeah. So we'll put in the show notes links to your centers and things like that, and any other resources that you think are appropriate. Send us over those links, and you'll find them in the show notes, guys. Okay. Where would people find you? What's a good place to connect
Uh,
with you?
our Instagram is really the best. We're constantly posting on there, empowering just empowering parents and informative information. So Instagram, and I can send you the thing. It's at Learning Lab FL. And then our website, of course, too.
Okay, great.
Just that information.
Ali, it was great to have you on the podcast.
Yes. So nice meeting you. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. This podcast is sponsored by dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com. It's my day job when I'm not hosting this podcast. Tell me, do you know what you want to achieve in the workplace, but you're struggling with how to achieve it? Maybe you suspect some traits of dyslexia are getting in the way. Well, that's where Dyslexia Productivity Coaching comes in, because we give you a simple productivity system for your Apple devices that harnesses the creativity that comes with your dyslexia. It includes proven methods like note-taking, reminders, speech-to-text, mind mapping, and more, all tailored to your needs. It'll free up your time and help you achieve outstanding results. Book a complimentary call to discuss it with me, and if you do it soon, I may also be available to coach you personally via Zoom. So don't be shy, go to dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com or swipe up and book it now.